First up is a film called Kate. It is another one of Netflix's movie of the week type films, and I am so sad that it's just, I've come to expect mediocrity from these at best and pain to watch at worst. I think this one falls more into at least the mediocrity thing. It's really just the most unoriginal film. It stars Mary Elizabeth Winstead and Woody Harrelson, and it's not like these Netflix films don't attract a lot of big stars, but I don't understand why there's just such a dip in quality filmmaking when it comes to these. It used to be that the Netflix original, like if Netflix was like, hey, we have an original film, you go, oh my God, it's going to be amazing. But now it's just so churn things out and out and out, and it's getting really frustrating. This film reminds me somewhat of Gunpowder Milkshake with Karen Gillan and Lena Headey that came out a couple weeks ago. It's another female assassin film, which I'm all for. Like, I'm all for that. I love women kicking ass, but when it's done in such a just phoned in way, it becomes really painful to watch. Mary Elizabeth Winstead plays Kate, an assassin who's living in Japan, and then I have this whole hang-up about how it's the most stereotypical portrait of Yakuza-y Japan that you could paint in modern day. It's definitely made by a white male director, and so there's a clear lack of authenticity to all those parts of it. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is doing fine. It's also one of those movies where they just love punishing the protagonist physically, and I think you can do this in a way in films that have roles that are physically trying, certainly for characters, and I like when characters take a beating in a movie and continue to show that damage, as opposed to these sort of superheroic characters who don't have superpowers and should be in hospitals by the time that you're a quarter of the way into the movie, but somehow keep going. This one starts to go down that path, and it certainly delights in showing us the gore of this character starting to fall apart. But then they continue to pull off just completely unbelievable things. And I don't know who this is for. I guess you could watch it in the background. That's totally fine. It's particularly violent, so be aware of who is around you while you're watching it if you're watching it in the background. But unfortunately, there is no world in which I'm like, yes, you know what you really need to watch this week? Kate on Netflix. So I'm only going to give it 2 out of 5. And then the next film I have is called Queenpins. It is currently out in theaters, but I believe it is going to make its way to Paramount Plus, and it stars Kristen Bell, Kirby Howell-Baptiste, Paul Walter Hauser, Vince Vaughn, Stephen Root, Joel McHale, and Bebe Rexha, and I actually really wanted to enjoy this film. Like, I like the concept. It's actually supposedly inspired by a true story about these 2 women who pull off a coupon scheme that earns them millions of dollars. And basically what they do is they resell coupons for X amount of the value that they're actually worth. And I love a good scheme. I love a good crime movie. I love a good multi-level marketing story. I'm kind of weirdly obsessed with those. And I feel like extreme couponers and multi-level marketers, there's sort of a Venn diagram of those two. And I'll actually talk about MLMs in my next thing. But I feel like this movie had a lot of components that could have made it successful, but there's something about the way it all gelled together that was just really dissatisfying. Like, they take a lot of shortcuts, and I feel like there's a lot of laziness involved. So for Kristen Bell's character, this is not a huge spoiler, but, you know, she's in debt because she and her husband, who's played by Joel McHale, have gone through a bunch of rounds of fertility treatment, and they have been unsuccessful. And it's like, okay, I see that you were telling me this in order to make me feel sympathetic to this character who's about to commit a bunch of crimes, but the way that they do it is just so indelicate that I'm like, nobody talks like this, nobody behaves like this. And then there's there's sort of 2 buddy comedies also happening. You've got the buddy comedy between Kristen Bell and Kirby Howell-Baptiste, and then you've got this awkward buddy comedy between Paul Walter Hauser and Vince Vaughn's characters. And Paul Walter Hauser is a loss prevention officer for a chain of grocery stores, and Vince Vaughn is a federal, he works for the Post Service. And if you aren't aware and are considering committing crimes, the Post, if you do it through the mail, there actually is a law enforcement agency that is involved there. But so those 2 are this weird dynamic, and I think what it comes down to is, even though some of these characters should be likable, none of them come off as likable. And not that every movie has to have that, but because you're asking us to invest so much in these characters and watch them do kind of absurd things, it's hard to get behind any of it. So I truly wanted to like this movie, but I also, in good conscience, just cannot recommend it. I'm also going to give this 2 out of 5. And then the last thing I have this week is a 4-part docu-series on Amazon Prime, and it's called LuLaRich, and it is about LuLaRoe, the multi-level marketing leggings company, and the impact that it has had on people in general. And if you're not aware of what a multi-level marketing scheme is, I assure you, you have been approached by one. It's things like Amway, Avon, Herbalife, Mary Kay, if you want to go old school, the Tupperware parties and things like that. And I'm kind of obsessed with the economy and just machine of these things. And they claim that they are different from pyramid schemes because pyramid schemes are illegal, because multi-level marketing groups are selling things. And it's just fascinating to watch LuLaRich and see exactly how this impacted people's lives, and also just sort of the unapologetic nature of most of the people in it. The most interesting thing I think about LuLaRich is that they actually got interviews with the founders of LuLaRoe, who are fascinating characters. You can tell that the filmmakers are dancing around this fine line of they don't want the founders to feel attacked and bounce out of the interview, because clearly that is like the core thing that separates this from, say, any other documentary on it. But there's sort of a kid gloves handling of some of the people in it, and it's, there's certainly gray areas when it comes to these MLMs, but it was interesting to take a deep dive into it. I think it probably could have been crammed into 3 episodes. They draw things out a little bit in some of them, but it's just fascinating watching how these machines work. So take a look at that if you're interested. It's on Amazon Prime.